All right, welcome back. Anytime I post a beach resin piece, the #1 question I get above all other questions is, what white pigment are you using? And I actually have 2 different ones that I use. The one that I choose is the one that I find first, so there's no rhyme or reason. And to be honest, all the pieces that I have in my house, I couldn't tell you which one I used on what. So I thought it might be interesting to do a side-by-side comparison and then have a close comparison of each one of them at the end. So one of the ones that I use is this mixol, and another one I use is Cast and Craft. So I've got my panels here, I've painted them. I painted them 2 different colors, only for interest, because I had just gotten this paint and wanted to know what it looked like in a beach pour. So this one is phthalo turquoise, and this one is phthalo blue green shade. This way I don't have to color my resin other than using my white pigment for my waves. So I've got my resin already mixed here. I like to use Moss Epoxy's art resin. So I'm going to use the same exact resin on both of them. So the only difference between the 2, other than the colored base, is going to be the white pigment that I add when I do the waves. So first thing I'm going to do is add some sand to the mix for the beach. And this is just playbox sand, it's not anything special. But I do mix my resin up completely first and make sure that it's totally mixed, and then I add my sand to it. And what I'm going to do for this video is I'll be talking you through the first layer, and then the subsequent wave layers I'm just going to let you watch. I'm not going to be talking through it. The process is exactly the same for each layer. The only difference is I go a little bit farther back. A little bit more sand. And then we'll do a close-up comparison at the very end, just to see how they look different, if they look different, and then you can choose for yourself which one you prefer. All right, so my sand is mixed here. I'm gonna put half on one and then spread it out on the top. I'll spread it over the sides as well, but I'm not gonna do that until the end because I need my gloved hand to spread the resin over this area, and I don't want to have sand on my hand to be doing that. So I'm trying to keep my hand as clean as possible until the end, and then I'll do the sand. And some of it's going to flow over the side on its own, and that's totally fine. I use my stir stick here to spread it around. And you can have it as high or as low as you want it to. I just like the suggestion of a beach because I do like to put some shells and some sand dollars, some little starfish. I like to put little things on there just to make it look like it's part of the beach. All right, I'm gonna leave that there. And then we're gonna pour our clear on here. I have 2 cups of clear here. I'm gonna pour most of it, and then I'm gonna leave a little bit left over to add my white to. Just checking it to make sure that I've got enough. You don't need a ton of white, but you do wanna make sure that you have enough. And I tend to actually make too much white, but that's okay. I'd rather have more than less. And really, I typically will have a mold or 2 on the side. So if I have some left over, I'll just put it in the mold so it doesn't go to waste. And the one thing I don't think I've mentioned that I do want to say is I've already made sure that my wood panels here are level. You want to make sure that they're level. If you have a low spot, your resin is going to flow to that low spot. So you definitely want to make sure that you are as level as possible. And this first layer, I'm going to cover the entire thing. My wave is going to go right up next to my sand. And then I use my gloved hand here, to make sure that the whole front is covered, and then to make sure that the resin is running down the sides. And by making it run down the sides, you just kind of control the evenness of it running down the sides, and it tends to look a little bit better. If you wanted to have pristine sides, you could just tape them off and not have resin flowing down them. Some people like to do that too. I like to have it flowing over the sides myself. No right or wrong, just personal preference. And I'm having the clear go almost up to the sand. You can have it go right up to the sand, that's totally fine. I'm just gonna pour the white in there, so I don't necessarily need it to go up that far. I'm using my one hand to try to keep my piece steady so that it stays level. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to take my glove off. Actually, I should have left it on and done the side. I'm going to go grab another glove and do that sand. I'd already forgotten about that. So I have to get a new glove for that. There's no way I'm going to get that glove inside out and on my hand nicely. So I'm doing this the same as I'm doing the clear for the ocean. I'm just using my hand to put the sand down the side. You're going to see some of the wood panel, and I don't mind that. I like to keep that part of the wood natural anyways, so that it looks a little bit more natural. And I just keep doing it to make sure the whole piece is covered. So the next step after this, I'm going to take my heat gun and I'm going to run it over the whole thing, and it's going to pop all the bubbles that have risen to the surface. You'll see my sand here is white. All those white parts are little bubbles that have risen to the surface. So we want to pop those. They don't go away on their own. Let's get this sand out of the way here. And we're going to pop them before we add the white. Because once we add the white, we're going to blow out those waves, and we don't really want to be touching it too much after that. All right, once your sand is down the side, now it's safe to take the glove off. Oops. And if you happen to do that and touch the resin, that's okay. You've got gloves on. All right, so now I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm going to remove all of the bubbles. So I'm just using it on a low setting with the regular tip that comes on it. When it comes to doing the waves, we're going to be putting on a narrower tip so that we can direct that air a little bit more. And this is something that I'll continue to do for the first hour or so. I'll regularly come back to it and check to see if any bubbles have risen to the surface, and I will remove them. If by chance, and I can see a little hair sitting there, I probably can't see it on camera, but I can see it. If by chance you get a hair, take a toothpick and pull it out. And then I'll just have that toothpick to the side there if anything happens to float into it. You can see lots of bubbles, so I'm just gonna remove them as much as possible. When you're removing the bubbles, the heat also thins the resin out a little bit. And that's gonna help when we blow out our waves as well. All right, so now we mix. So when it comes to mixing things into your resin, you don't want more than 10% of the amount that's in there to be whatever you're adding. And I've never found I needed to add more than that, but you just want to keep that in mind. When you're mixing whites, what you want to do is A, mix them. B, if you do this and you can't see your stick through it, you're good. You don't need to add any more. So let's put the lid back on that one, and then we'll mix our mixol. And when you do this, you can also see if there's little striations or whatever in it, that means it's not mixed enough. Once you don't see that and you don't see your stick, you've got enough in there. So we're good for that. Put the lid back on that one. And then it's as simple as pouring a line between the sand and the water. And I start off of my piece and then end off the piece. I'm going to do the same for this side here. That one wasn't quite off the piece, so I kind of miss it. I like to start off the piece so that I do get that stripe on the side there. And the first thing I'm going to do is hit it with the heat gun regular to get any bubbles out, because there's always bubbles in there. I'm going to take this glove off because I've got sand all over my hands and I don't need it for touching the resin anymore. Now I'm going to put the narrower head on here. Careful, because this is hot because we've been using it. And then I'm going to hold it almost horizontal and blow those white of the waves out. And I have it on high when I do that. And then if you want, you can blow that out a little bit more. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And then the last step is I take a baker's torch and I torch it. Just lightly, it pops any remaining bubbles. And you want to do it about 6 inches away from your piece. And then the next step is just sit and let it cure. But before I'm going to let this one cure, I'm going to add a few shells and stuff like that to the beach. You have to do this while your resin is wet so that those pieces stick in there. That curing resin is what's going to help hold all those pieces in there. You can't glue them on it there afterwards. So typically you do 1 sand dollar, 1 starfish, and then scatter a few shells around. I'll put links to all the supplies that I like to use at the bottom or in the description. I typically use the same stuff all the time because I just like it. And sometimes what I'll do, if I have little tiny glass bottles, I like to add little message in a bottle, which is kind of fun. And then I've got a ton of these shells, so I just scatter them along the rest of the beach. And I pretty much leave them where they land, because to me that looks the most natural. Sometimes, like here, I've got a clump of them all together. Sometimes I'll separate them just if they've happened to land in a big clump, but otherwise I typically will just leave them where they land. All right, I'm gonna let that completely cure and I will see you tomorrow and we'll add the next wave. All right, here is the final product after the last wave. I apologize for not filming the one wave in there. I swear I hit record, but it didn't take. So there's not a ton of difference between the two different white pigments. So that explains why I can't really tell the difference from the pieces that I have in the house as to which I've used for what. They all get really pretty lacing. Some lines, like here, I'm a little bit thick with the white, but I like it, so I just leave it. This one here, when I did the big clump of white when I poured it, after I turned the camera off, I did blow it out one more time just to get some of the excess off of there. But there you go. Both of them, in my opinion, work fairly similar to each other. And like I said, the only difference between the two was the white pigment. The resin was exactly the same. So there you go. From that, you choose which one you want to try.